I bopped my camera again. So let me pick it up where I left off. We're going to do some hands. Now, if you look at your own hand, you're going to notice that your palm and your fingers, they're about the same length, okay? And then your fingers are broken up into segments. The thumb attaches closer to the wrist and sort of sticks off to the side. So we can do basically that. And also, we've got reference photos. We've got some really good reference photos all over the internet, as well as some that I uploaded into the module that you guys can look at. The other thing I want you to notice is how big our hands are. Our hand is really, if you stretched it out, it's about the same height as our head. It's surprisingly bigger than people think it is. So the number one thing I think when I'm walking around the classroom trying to correct for people is that they are drawing their hands too small. One head goes from line to line, okay? So we're gonna need her hands to be pretty close to that. I'm gonna make it even bigger, okay? That's why it's like, you know, the jokes about a certain president's hands being small, or, you know, it's funny because we expect hands to be a certain size, and it is kind of funny when they're not that size. Okay, so I'm still a little bit not even here, so I'm going to break that up in half. So basically I've drawn one shape, kind of like a rectangle, a little wider right here, and a second shape right here, tapering down. Okay, so this is the back of your hand, this is your fingers. We're going to connect a thumb off of this. Let me zoom in and see if I can get you a closer view. Okay, we're going to connect a thumb off of here, and I like to do something like that. Okay, I do give it a bit of a point. I'm not going to be drawing a lot of fingernails, but it is kind of nice to give a point to the tip of some fingertips to suggest that there might be a nail going on there. Okay, so there's the wrist. And then for the fingers, you guys can do a couple different things. You can kind of bend it in the middle, and maybe the rest of these ones are going straight, and maybe the little pinky is sticking out that way. Let me see what my other kind of go-to poses are. Let me draw one on, I'll finish this one. So we'll give it a thumb. Make that a little bit narrower. Since it's a side view, we're not going to quite see all of that. And then I'll just try to give myself a graceful fingertip right here. And the other fingers can even be sort of hiding behind. That's fine. Sometimes we'll see a little pinky tucked in behind. Okay, so if you're struggling with hands and they are a little challenging, look at reference photos and see if you can come up with a couple go-to hand poses. Something I definitely recommend to people is trace some drawings of hands. Look at actual illustrations of hands. Go through the handouts that I've provided in the course content. If you like the look of some of the hands, just put a tracing paper over it and trace them several times. When you trace them a few times, you're going to start to get the feel for what the shapes are doing. And that makes it a lot easier once you're kind of have felt the shape of the hand when you've drawn it yourself. So here is a back of the hand. Here is the bottom part of the hand. This time I'm going to try to bend her fingers in. Okay, so I'm going to bring this more in. So I'm going to give her a thumb right there. Here's the back of the hand. Here's a finger. Here's a finger. Okay. So if I stretched all that out, it would be about as long as that. And then we can have maybe her other fingers back behind. Okay. I feel like my thumbs today are just a little too small. Let's see if I can fix that. Okay. Now, don't overthink it because the hands are rarely the point of the illustration, right? It's nice to have a pose where she can be holding a handbag or a dog leash or who knows what she's holding, like hanging down by her side. That's kind of a nice pose to have. And just a relaxed hand pose is nice as well. This pose with the fingers curled in, we will do a walking pose next week, I think, and we will for sure end up with a hand like that, I bet you. Okay, let's come up and work on the collarbone area. You'll see this on our reference photos, but it's great to get those collarbones in place. So they're going to connect over from the shoulder-ish area down like this. Okay, hers are kind of tilted downwards. It could be the lighting. I don't usually draw them that way. I usually draw them straight. I do it the way I normally draw it. I usually keep them pretty straight. Okay, and then it dips down right there in the center. And it's nice to know where those are because a lot of times the light hits it. We are going to have a swim or lingerie look in our women's project, so you'll want to be able to get some nice anatomy here and get some nice shading. There are some tendons that pull down from the side of the neck towards that spot, so I'll usually lightly draw those in, and then I can use that to help me with shading later. Okay, so let's see where we're at. Belly button lands on the waist. What else do I need to include here? I feel like that's the basics, guys. Now, we're going to talk faces in the next video, but for now, we've got a workable body. So what I'd like you guys to do before you submit this is just polish it up a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to a 2B, sharpen it up. I'm going to put a little shading on this. So as we shade her, what I want you to think back to was our assignment where we did the cylinders. And think about how the highlights and the shadows are functioning on the body. If you have a nice reference photo, feel free to go off of that. Or if you're just going to do some kind of general purpose shading, you can see how I've placed a coarse shadow right here. Notice that it's not on the edge. I let the light reflect off a little bit on the outer edge of the leg, and then I brought in some other shadows throughout the leg. The shin bone tends to be highlighted, and then I'll just work my way around. So let me just demo that since the video is going here, and I haven't knocked my phone off the desk yet. I'll go ahead and give her some shading down the leg. I'll go ahead and assume my light source is coming from the right. So I'll put most of my shading on her left-hand side. So here's a nice core shadow. We're gonna go ahead and drag in that shadow right here. Now you would not be expected in any way to know where to put any anatomy shading on the body, but if you've got a reference photo, that'll tell you. You can see it right there. So we'll do that on both sides. And I'm gonna put shading here. I'm gonna wrap this shadow down her kneecap and a little on the other side of the knee, a little shading here. We'll let the brightest part of her leg be right about here. Okay. Get a little shadow below her kneecap, a little bit down here. And the shin bones are usually connecting from the inner part of the kneecap. So we can put that just like that, and then I'll drop in some shadow to this side a little bit more dramatically. Usually gives us something that looks kind of nice. I didn't mention this, I don't think, but if you enjoy drawing figures and if you want to get better at it, the absolute best thing you can do is take a figure drawing class, take a life drawing class. These are the classes where you draw live models who are incredibly talented at holding a pose for an extended time. And depending on the class, you can use whatever media you like, whether it's charcoal or paint or whatever. But there's no better way to get good at drawing the human figure faster than in a life drawing class. In fact, I would go so far as to say there's no better way to get good at drawing, period, than in a life drawing class, because you get to see so many contours and shadows and really think about value and negative space and all of it. It's an absolutely incredible drawing experience, and I'd recommend it to anybody. The models are typically nude, which sounds uncomfortable, but it's not. Once you go there for like an hour, you'll suddenly find it not awkward or unusual at all. It just feels like a really helpful class setting, and I can't recommend it enough. You might be able to find a community center that does a drop-in for a donation. I used to do that stuff when I was really young, like high school. I was going to life drawing classes because I just really wanted to practice, and it was offered at my local community college, and so that's what I did. Okay, we'll put some shading on her crotch point here as it wraps underneath her body. And then for the torso, we've got reference photos here. I'll see if I can kind of follow what we're seeing on some of these very fit looking women and capture a little bit of that shading on their torso. But if you treated this entire torso like a cylinder and just approached it the way we shaded the cylinder early on in the class, you know, that'll get you for most purposes as far as you want to go. And frequently they're going to be wearing clothes, so we'll be more interested in shading the clothes than in shading the anatomy. Let me get this side here. And I've just got my pencil on my side. I'm going relatively quickly just to get a little something on here. And you'll notice that as I'm doing this, I'm polishing up my edges. Use this opportunity with a little bit more pressure to give your drawing just, you know, you just kind of want to commit and polish it up with some nice lines. You can keep this in here. If you guys want to put a bathing suit or something on her, you can. I like to put this bikini line because it helps me position garments later on. What we're drawing now is the template everybody's going to be using for when you draw your actual illustration for the women's project. So you'll be using her, don't lose her. Next assignment is going to be drawing her with, well, we're going to do faces, but then we're going to draw her in a more sort of a sassy pose, what we call a high hip pose or an S-curve pose. So we'll give her a little bit more attitude, and that S-curve is the basis for our walking pose. Okay, if you don't want to worry too much about the hands, I will shade in just a little bit in kind of the palm area, which would be away from the light. And then I'll just come in with a sharp pencil and darken up the fingertips. And let me see if I can take my little teeny eraser and fix up her thumb. Usually like drawing thumbs. I'm not having a good thumb day today. Okay, and so we'll just continue shading, shading her body until we've got something nice. Oh, let me talk about the bust area, because that's kind of fun to revisit our lesson on spheres and how the light hits a rounded shape, which is really important because faces, lips, foreheads on female fashion figures, they are fairly rounded. And if you can notice where the highlights and shadows go, that will really help you get some great effects on your drawings. So remember when we drew the sphere, remember how there was some reflected light at the bottom? And do you remember how the core shadow made sort of a crescent moon shape? Well, we've got the same thing going on here. And what I'll do in addition to that is I will drop a shadow below the bust, okay, where it's casting a shadow down onto her body. The cast shadows are one of the things that I think people forget, and without them, our brain knows something's wrong. We just, without that cast shadow, we just don't feel like things are quite where they belong. Okay, for the collarbones, so I can darken right above, and let the light hit that collarbone. I'll leave it bright, and I'll just sort of darken below it and shade that down towards the bust. Now, you'll notice I left all my roughed out shapes in here, my ovals and my angles and all of that stuff. I have no problem leaving that on this drawing, but if it bothers you, erase it away, and you can really polish her up and make her look really, really finished. But because we're working out the anatomy and you guys might use this for reference later on, I think it's not a bad idea just to leave that stuff in place. You could always redraw her or trace her and get a really clean version. So again, don't lose her because one, she's going to go in your portfolio, and two, we're going to be tracing off of her to build out some other poses and things. Okay, I'm going to do some shading on her neck. And then I need a separate video just to talk about faces. So let me just get a little bit more shading here, a little shading there, and step back and see if there's other stuff. I know I'm going to walk away from this and want to add things or change things in a little while, but for now I think I've got a fairly functional figure that's in the correct 9 heads proportions for our fashion illustrations. Okay, just a little more blending of my shading. Are you guys starting to turn your pencils sideways? I'd be curious to know if you've been trying it, if you're already comfortable doing it, or if it's something that's more challenging for you. Okay, am I going to walk away? Am I going to walk away? It's like really hard to stop once I get started. Okay, that's it. I'll see you guys in the next video.